So, you have a university interview coming up. Now, this can feel like a very daunting prospect. I want to interview well. I really want to say and do all the right things. I want to get into the university of my choice. It's normal to feel concerned, anxious, or stressed. I certainly did before my Cambridge University interview. But today, I want to demystify the interview. I want to give you the insight, the preparation, the expert knowledge that I didn't have, and help you to present yourself much better than I did. So today, to help me do that, we're joined by Dr. Ramsey Faragher. Ramsey, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Sam. I'm looking forward to today.
Dr. Faragher is a By-Fellow of Queen's College, Cambridge, well known for alumni such as actor Stephen Fry, AI pioneer Demis Hassabis, journalist Emily Maitlis, and British members of Parliament such as Stephen Kinnock and Liz Kendall. As well as being a Cambridge alumnus himself, Dr. Faragher has interviewed nearly 1,000 students now for Queen's College, Cambridge, over more than a decade, and has a clear thought process regarding what he's looking for in potential future students. So today we will discuss our own successful Oxbridge interviews all those years ago. We will explain how the interviews have changed with time and what you can expect from a Cambridge interview in 2022. We'll explain how a Cambridge interview will be structured and conduct a brief mock interview. We'll outline what an experienced Cambridge academic like Ramsey is looking for in an interviewing candidate, and we'll explain the personal statement interview, what to expect and what interviewers are looking for. So feel free to skip to the relevant timestamps in this video. They will be down in the description, and return to this video as you see fit. So by the end of the video, hopefully you'll feel a little bit more prepared and more relaxed regarding your interview for Oxbridge. So Ramsey, if we start with how our Cambridge interviews went all those many, many moons ago, feels like a long time ago. What, for me, kind of 20 years ago. How about yourself? Do you want to give that
Yeah,
away
so
for
I
the audience?
interviewed. I must have interviewed in 1999. So it was a very sobering year for me a few years ago when I was interviewing students and could see on their own stuff that they weren't born when I had done my interview. I'd passed that landmark a few years back now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm around about that milestone as well. So, do you want us to tell us a little bit about your Cambridge interview? Where was it conducted? How did it feel? What was the layout back then?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad and my PhD in Churchill, and Churchill College is very close to the natural science department, the physics department of my interest. And that was a big factor for me in choosing the college. I think we'll come back to choosing the colleges at the end of all of this. But I had gone to the open day at Churchill and I'd met the people who were going to be interviewing me. I'd actually sought them out. And I was much more relaxed then about my interview, having met the people and chatted with them, and I felt quite comfortable that I'd be going back and speaking to these people again. And I think that was quite a good thing for me to have done. It was a good factor of me being relaxed about going back for those interviews, and that's actually one of my main memories of them, to be honest. There was as we'll discuss, you have an interview about what you're interested in personally and why you're interested in the course, and for the particularly scientific subjects, you have very rigorous interviews and sometimes exams about the actual content of the subject you're doing. And so I can remember a few of my questions, having to work out the square root of 99 in an interview. It was an interesting one to be asked. And another one I remember was comparing a mass spring balance system with an electrical circuit and being asked to explain, if I was mapping the physical objects in the mass spring system to electrical components, what and why the mapping would be. What about you? Do you remember your interview questions?
Yeah, I believe mine was something similar about simple harmonic motion as well. So it was kind of derive the omega equation for a simple harmonic motion system with a spring and a mass. I believe I seem to remember being asked to work out whether I was more powerful than a kettle. So this was how would I work out how much work I was doing over time, and then comparing that to a kettle and realizing that I can't keep up with a kettle in terms of being powerful. Apparently, the specific heat capacity of water is too high. In terms of the experience of my interview, I remember it being incredibly daunting, to be honest, and this was mainly due to the fact that I had to travel down to Cambridge from Leeds. I had to stay overnight for 2 days in a strange environment in a new town. As a 17-year-old, that was quite daunting. I remember doing that. I want to say it was in December, so it was kind of very dark and a little bit ominous. Getting to a new place, you couldn't really get the lay of the land or see exactly what was going on. You were just sort of taxied to one of the colleges to do the interviews. My luck being as it is, the heating wasn't working in my room. There was no bedding, so it was not particularly nice setup. And then on the day of the interview, you had kind of set 30-minute slots with some of the academics who'd be running the interview. So we were just kind of sat around all day in the college bar, kind of worrying with one another, all the interview candidates, getting kind of sporadic news back from, who's a nice interviewer, who's a not nice interviewer, what questions were you asked, people then feverishly kind of flicking through books to try and work out how they might answer the same question if they got asked it. So it was all a bit of a mess, really. In terms of the interviews themselves, I remember the academics being very friendly, being very welcoming. The nature of the questions I found, particularly for the subject specific stuff, talking about physics and maths, was more trying to show that I could work out an unfamiliar problem from scratch. So rather than just kind of firing, do you remember this from the course? Do you remember this from the course? Do you know this bit of physics? Do you know this bit of maths? It was usually giving you a problem that you might not have come across, something that kind of stretched you, and trying to get you to explain how you would go from point A to point B to get the answer step by step using, general analytic techniques, general knowledge of physics and maths, rather than just being like, what's the enzyme that cuts something, or, what is the equation to work out, energy or power or whatever it might be. It wasn't specific knowledge. It was more a difficult problem that you were asked to kind of tussle with, show that you could persevere with, and bring your kind of general thinking to bear on. In terms of the personal statement interview, which we might get onto a little bit at the end, that was more just show that you're a more well-rounded individual, show that you get involved with things like sports or clubs outside of school, music, playing musical instruments, show that you have dedication, passion, an ability to organize your time outside of academic pursuits, and therefore that you'll take full advantage of the opportunities and the facilities that will be afforded to you down in Cambridge. So those are kind of my more general thoughts about my experience of the interview. It was quite a daunting thing to go through at the time, but I gather if we move on to how it is today, they've made a lot of changes in that regard, right? For a start, you don't have to necessarily travel down to Cambridge. So a lot of that might have been removed over the last kind of couple of decades.
Yeah, exactly. So post-COVID, things have changed quite a lot, which I'll discuss now. I mean, it literally sort of terrifies me. It was horrible to hear you just say that you traveled all the way down to the inability to sleep properly in a room that wasn't heated and they hadn't given you bedding. I mean, stuff like that is just
to be fair, like it was probably an oversight by the cleaner, and I probably broke the radiator
without a shadow of a doubt. That was not part of the test. Let's put it that way. And it's things like that.
I did think that. I was like, what if I'm being tested? Will I? How am I going to stay warm in this freezing room? And then somebody's going to burst in the morning and say, "You're in."
You're in. They separate them out into the people that fixed the radiator and the people that didn't fix the radiator for the engineering tripod. No. So this is the thing. So a huge amount of work has gone on in the last 20 years to try to ensure that everything is as fair as it can be. And one of the things that as part of that fairness is how easy is it for people to physically come to interview at Cambridge. And so through COVID, we had to create remote interviewing, which has its own challenges. But this year, the interviewing will stay remote, even though it could go back into in-person. And Trinity College is the only college that's returning to in-person. And the main reason is these aspects of the costs, the applicants, the difficulties in traveling in, the panic about flights and delays and all of these sorts of things, and removing those things from the international students so that there isn't an issue with how kind of fair, stressful and expensive it is.
So that sets a little bit more of an even playing field for the overseas students. Obviously, it's very difficult to get here if you live overseas. It's less nerve-wracking to actually have to travel down to Cambridge physically. You can do this in an environment that you're more familiar with at home. There's less barriers, I guess, in terms of cost and anxiety. You don't have to pay your train fares or worry about anything like that. And it's just easier all round and a more even playing field. Is that kind of the idea there, I guess?
Exactly. And a great part of the traditional experience is that they come and see Cambridge and they can visit Cambridge, and whether they succeed or not in getting in, that they get to visit the college and things like that. But that can happen on other days, coming to open days and things like that. And it's much better to do that bit in advance and use that to help choose your college, as we'll talk about later. And you touched on something else very interesting in your historical recollection of the past, of people asking each other what they were asked, in their interviews.
Getting fuzzy now, like it's as I get older.
Yeah, but I mean, that's always been a big challenge, right? That we have to be very conscious, and had to be in those days, that as kind of the day got on and the weeks got on, were any of the questions we were asking kind of getting out. And so a big part of becoming an experienced interviewer is trying to recognize any of those signs. And as we'll discuss when we discuss the interview process in a moment, we have a lot more questions than there's time for. And we'll move through questions in a manner where, if it feels like this question is being done very quickly and very easily, we'll exercise another part of the syllabus. Yeah. And sure enough, if the person is just a rocket scientist that's entered the room, they'll smash through loads of questions. Whereas, if they're really strong on the opening question we use with everyone, and then a weak on some of the others, then there might have been some overhearing of things going on there. So there's a whole set of tools that we put into place to try to stop that as well. And at least one of the benefits of online interviewing now is that risk should be reduced in some senses, but we then have to have other ways of trying to ensure that there's no cheating going on with the online stuff.
Yeah, people throwing it onto, recording the interview, throwing it onto Kaggle or whatever it is, and people being able to kind of see that, I guess, is a slight concern. Is it, I guess, on the side of the interviewers as well, there's, I guess, do you receive any sort of specific training to try and make these interviews as fair as possible for everyone who's going to attend?
It is a huge amount of work, and I'll come back to that in a sec. But on the topic of the training, so we basically all have to pass our own training before we can interview. That we have to have signed up and completed the training course and stuff. And it teaches us things about recognizing our own cognitive biases and trying to ignore them, how we set up the interviews and the whole process. Every candidate is interviewed by multiple people. There's also a written exam. So there's lots of factors in there to try to remove any cognitive biases or any favoritism that's unconscious because someone came from the same town you came from, or any of this sort of stuff. Stuff to say and not to say. I mean, it's the strangest thing. It's good to realize, so back when people were traveling in, one of the most natural things you'd think to say when someone comes into your room, like, hi, what's your name? How are you? I'm so-and-so, how was your journey down? An icebreaker. It's a huge no-no to ask how the journey down was, because it could have been a horrendous thing, right? They could have had some horrible experience and they've just calmed themselves down, come into your interview, and you immediately remind them about the fact that there was some disaster.
How was your room? Do you have a nice sleep last night?
Exactly. So there's all of these, there's sort of the list of things you don't ask, and the list of things you do ask, and things like simple things like we don't reach out to give a handshake because it might not be culturally appropriate for the person to shake hand, things like this, right? So there was a lot of stuff for the in-person interview and the traveling in that the training caught to make sure that we didn't say anything or do anything that would, advantage or disadvantage anybody. So that is taken very seriously today, which is good, and it extends into the online teaching now. So the specific training that we do to make sure we can cover stuff through it online. And you were saying before about you kind of got the feel different interviewers might have had different feelings about doing interview. You typically have two interviewers in an interview and two interviews, so there'll be four people physically involved in two pairs, and a written exam. It's good for loads of reasons, including catching there being a problem. So I've dealt before with my co-interviewer being sick that day and not being able to interview, and then there are spare people in college, people like the chaplain and other members of college who don't do interviewing directly themselves, and they're just on standby every single day to be that other person in the room. For a variety of reasons. It's good to have two people in the room, both making notes about what happened in the interview and things like that. And certainly, it's good. It's not uncommon to have like one senior interviewer and a junior interviewer. So, as we said, I've been interviewing for 10 years now, and so I'll cycle through typically with quite a new interviewer, and I'll work every year with an interviewer who's only interviewed for 1, 2, or 3 years. And then sort of, they can keep promoting on to go and interview with other pairs and stuff like that. So we try and maintain levels of mentoring within the interview process itself and things like that. And it's important because there can be times when you have to recognize a situation and deal with it, and you need an experienced interviewer to be one of the pairs who'll say, do you know what, actually we're going to reschedule this interview, and for these reasons. And it's only happened twice in my 10 years, but I've dealt with a situation live where I've just said we'll reschedule this, and it's been because of some incident that's happened before the person came in, and I could tell they were too flustered and were upset, or one was in this remote interviewing scenario where I was not satisfied that at the other side they were on their own, and things like this. So there's a judgment call made as well that an interview could be suspended, but it's entirely to benefit the other person and make sure that they get a fair, full experience of the interview and they're not hampered by anything that might have happened.
So I guess the bottom line takeaway from that for the people watching is the fairness of these interviews will be taken incredibly seriously. Everyone will get as even an opportunity as is possible to be given, and you should be quite relaxed about that. You will get a fair hearing as much as is possible.
Yeah, and there's an awful lot of scribbling that goes on with both interviewers, and it's because we're recording everything that's going on as best as possible, the exact start time, the exact end time, the time we move between different questions. And it's all to do with just capturing that anyone can look afterwards and read all of the notes and be satisfied that the interviews were conducted in a fair manner. And we'll talk about
don't feel put out if there's scribbling, if there's kind of mild talking in the background. That's normal for the interview process. It's not people concerned about how you're behaving in the interview. It's just the normal running of the interview.
It's neither a good sign nor a bad sign. It's a sign of it's all being recorded in as much detail as possible. Yeah.
Excellent. So maybe if we please.
Sorry, you were saying. Oh yeah, just I think I mentioned it is a huge undertaking for the interviewers. I mean, it's obviously a hugely stressful and busy time for the interviewees, but it's worth noting that we put an awful lot of time into not just the interviewing period itself, but the time in the lead up and afterwards as well. So I ensure we have unique questions every year at Queen's. Some colleges they might cycle questions and deal with that, but we have unique questions every single year. So there's the challenge of coming up with the same level of consistency in interview questions every year and never repeating them.
I'm sure I got the hard year of exams every year when I was at Cambridge. They say that, but I'm sure I got the hard year. I know that's just ascertainment bias on my part, but it always feels like you got the hard question.
Well, a lot of effort goes into trying to keep a balance. So in the weeks leading up to the interview, 2 or 3 weeks for the interview teams will get together and start setting the questions. We'll practice those questions with colleagues, make sure they fit nicely in the time, exercise in the parts of the course. We'll have some spares. The interviews will take a week. There's been times when we've interviewed over 100 students in a year. At Queen's, the different colleges have different numbers of applicants and do different amounts of interviewing. There's discussions about trying to amortize that so that we don't have situations where some colleges interview like 25 people and other colleges interview 150 people for the same subject. So I think there's some work going on in the background trying to sort that out. But Queen's, for computer science, for example, is one of the most popular colleges. So we typically interview about 100 students a year. And that can just be for 6 or 8 places, depending on what's going on in terms of various things as to how many we'll take each year. And so all the interviewing happens, and then a few days after all of the interviewing is finished, we all get together, look at all of the results from the exam that they've sat, plus the 2 interviews. We have a ranking system where it all goes into a spreadsheet, and magic happens in the spreadsheet, which has a formula that ranks what the best to worst students are based on how their interviews went and how their exam went. And then we sort of then really carefully go through that. And it's inevitably, we don't just go, spreadsheet says these 6 are coming in. We chat about every single one. We go through our notes. And there's been some really good examples in the past where someone just completely fluffed the exam, or vice versa, completely fluffed the interview, maybe the technical interview, but not the exam and stuff like this. And so we discussed them in great detail, go through the notes. And I'm pleased to say that there's been some really good examples in the past where students that appear to have just potentially, screwed up one part of the interview and it drops down the magic spreadsheet. When we pulled them up ourselves and took them, they go on to be a first-class student. So we do put a lot of effort into the interview process and our efforts that go into them, being part of ensuring that it isn't just about exams. It's a lot to do with the balance of the different metrics we use. So sometimes the exam is what saves a student who fluffed the interview, or vice versa. The interview saves them. So it's a lot of work for both parties, but it does help us to try to make sure we really spot the best students. And then there's the pool. So like I said, we interview like over 100 students in Queen's, and we take 6 or 8. And so there's that real big discussion of like the last few places. And then we will put some number of the students that just missed out. So the ones that were good enough to get into Cambridge, but we just don't have enough room, they go into what's called the pool. And so other colleges can then take students out of the pool. And so you might get a letter from the college you interviewed at saying, unfortunately, you didn't get a place with us, but we've put you into the pool. You'll hear back from one of the other colleges and you might still get in. And, there's plenty of great success stories there where students have been pooled, gone to another college and gone on to be brilliant, first-class students in Cambridge. And
had some friends who did exactly that. So I can attest to that. Yeah.
And I think one of the most important things is there's just not enough space, right? And it's an achievement in itself to be good enough to come to interview at Oxford and Cambridge. And there are brilliant people who don't get into Oxford and Cambridge, just doesn't work out that year. They go to another university, they have an amazing time, they have a fantastic academic career, they get Nobel Prizes, they earn huge amounts of money, they start companies. It's not the end of the world if you don't get into Cambridge. You can always come visit.
So put your best foot forward, but it's not the be all and end all. Don't beat yourself up over it if you don't happen to get it. So moving a little bit on from there, that's a really good roundup of how seriously the interview is taken, because I think that's nice for people to hear, that they're probably stressing and worrying about the interview, and it's taken just as seriously on the other side, which I think is a very important message to get out to people who are going to be coming to interview. In terms of the actual interview itself. So let's deal with the subject specific interview first of all. We both did mathematical physics subjects. So maybe if we talk about a subject specific interview in physics or mathematics, how would that kind of interview be held? How would it proceed? Some general comments, and then we'll do a little bit of a mock up of what you might expect to see on the day.
Yeah, so colleges will all run ever so slightly different processes, but what I'm about to describe is very typical, which is that you'll have an interview which lasts about 22 minutes.
That's a very specific number.
Well, it's typically a 25-minute slot, which we allocate a minute for some intro chat, the 22 minutes of actual maths and extras, and then the opportunity to ask a question at the end and a little bit of extra for the movement between the questions.
A little bit of I guess probably half an hour slot, so a little bit of leeway between the next person coming in, perhaps.
And so certainly in we have a timer running, but it's not like when it goes beep 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 beep, beep you're just cut off. So there's the tiniest little hint of like, in the last 30 seconds, can you tell me this sort of thing, and a bit of leeway. Anyway. But what we'll try and do is have 3 questions that we'll try and cover in that time. And all of the questions have extensions, and no one ever finishes a full question. And that's the point. There's lots of flexibility for us to move between questions. Sometimes, as I said before, we might even pull in a 4th question if we've sort of, for various reasons, tried to move through and decided, actually, I want to see how they do on this one from our spares. So the key bit is that we are interested not just in seeing rapid, correct answers appearing, but how they're appearing. And we want to understand how the people think, and we're gauging how strong they are academically from the point of view of natural interest and natural ability in the subject, more than just have they memorized so much stuff that they can like churn through.
And that's very much that's very much the feel that I got when I was doing interview. It was, I don't want to know that you can read the textbook back to me. I want you to take 2 or 3 different parts from places in the course that you did in physics, and I want you to apply them to this new situation that you won't have covered as yet, which was very much what I felt in the interview, and very much what first year was like in Cambridge, teaching you how to think rather than just to regurgitate things from the textbook. I also thought that the point you made there was very important, that a lot of people coming to interview at Oxford and Cambridge will be very used to getting 95+% in exams, getting everything right, or very close to everything right, well within the time limits that they're given. That's not what we expect to happen here in a Cambridge interview. So if you don't reach the end of a question, and I found this incredibly, incredibly difficult in my first year in Cambridge, coming out of exams getting 60%, 65%, and thinking, that the sky is falling. This is what is supposed to happen. You are now being stretched.
A student that has only ever had 90% and plus their entire life will get 70s in Cambridge. Yeah, I mean, we're opening up that a whole nother gap of like, who is the best person on the planet this year? And the other thing is, there's a big step up in some of the subjects as well. I mean, in the sciences, the maths you're learning at university is a big step up from the maths you were learning at A level. And
I can definitely attest to that. The first year or the first year and a half of physics and maths, I found an incredible step up to the point that I had the usual, wobbles that people have. Oh, can I do this? Am I good enough to do this? And you put your head down, you get on with it, and you get through it. And in the end, I did well. But it's normal to feel that there has been a significant step up, particularly in specific subjects. And it's not something, although it is something that you need to work out and put the work into getting better at, it is normal that everyone feels this way, or the vast, vast majority of people feel this way.
Yeah. And the supervisors in the colleges are very used to this during the first year, catching it, keeping an eye out for it. And so, you know, Cambridge itself at least has a good system to catch this early and help to try and make sure the students can put in the extra work as needed. So the supervision system means that you sit down with a supervision partner, with a fellow of a college or a PhD student, typically every 2 weeks to go through homework from the lecture course. And so straight away, within the first sort of 2 weeks, 4 weeks of starting in Cambridge, the college that you're in is starting to get visibility as to how you're doing in the courses and catch anything early as needed. So that's one of the great strengths of the supervision system.
And I can attest to that, because I was probably having a few too many hijinks and liquid beverages perhaps at the start. And
what was it I wrote on your first ever?
Oh, that's right. So Ramsey was my lab supervisor in first year, and my first lab report, I thought it was going to fly back with 5 out of 5, and I think it came back with you're lucky to get a 2 out of 5 or something something to this effect.
I mean, it literally must have said, "See me after class." I think because we sat.
I think it did.
Chat,
I think it did say.
So I think you were basically the bottom of my pile, and so I sat down with you and said, you know, you're going to have to put more effort in. You know, I'll spend some more extra time with you next time. You know, it needs to be better than this, and gave you that early wake up call. Look at you now.
And I think that, and I think you're exactly right. That where that came from was almost the kind of blasé nature and arrogance, if that's the right word, of being used to it being easy. Like, why is this now difficult? Why do I need to put more time into this? Why is this not something I can just breeze through? And I think realizing that early and having that kind of sharp slap early was very good for me. So you know, I give you props now. I said some mean things about you at the time, but
that's all right. I'm still waiting for that 10% of your first paycheck. So you know, I keep every month I sort of check my pigeonhole.
My firstborn Ramsey. Well, we can discuss. I found that an incredibly difficult experience to go from being one of those people. Oh, you know, he's the guy who gets blah blah blah, to then being middle of the pack or lower in the pack at the start, to be honest, because it was such a big shift for me. And that's something you should be aware of going in, and it's normal. And you shouldn't feel that you're letting yourself down or this is something that is unique to you. This is something many, many, many people experience when they go to Oxford and Cambridge, as you said. Okay, so on a particular, let's talk about a specific interview. How would that proceed on the day? So I've applied to come and do my interview in Cambridge at Queen's College, for example. I've been given a date. The day comes. What can I expect to happen on that day? How will it proceed?
So certainly in this modern era, you will have been given in advance a set of links in an email and a date for an interview. And so you'll go to a Zoom waiting room before your interview, and at some point you'll be let in, and you'll see me and my interview partner sat next to me, and you'll also have links to a Jamboard to do scribbling on a whiteboard. And
I think we can show people a kind of example of that, so you'll be able to write on the board here.
Well, should we do this properly? We can go into full mock interview mode.
Shall we go through what a typical interview would be like? Okay, let me set up briefly, and we will return in a moment. Okay, we're back. So Ramsey, I'm going to play the role of a would-be student coming for my interview at Oxbridge. You are going to play, as you often have, the role of the interviewer. So let's do a quick jump cut here, and we will do a brief mock interview.
Hi there, is that Sam?
Hello, this is Sam here. Yep.
You can hear me properly, can you? I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Great, thank you.
Perfect, good. So I think this is your first interview, is that right? You haven't had your personal statement one yet?
No, I haven't. This is the first one that I'm having. So a little bit
Okay, great.
a little bit nervous, but we'll put our best
Don't
foot
worry,
forward.
there's nothing to be nervous about at all. Well, I'll give you a little bit of a background on what this one's going to be about. This is purely a maths interview, this one.
Okay.
We're going to go through 2 or 3 maths questions. They're all much longer than the time we actually allow you to work on them. So don't worry that I will rip you from one question to another. That's totally normal. We do that with everyone. We're trying to exercise as much of the syllabus as we can in the short time that we've got together. So before we start, there's a few questions I just have to ask you, if that's all right, for the nature of this online interview. So firstly, can you please confirm for me that you're the only person sat in that room?
Yeah, I'm the only person here. Yeah. Would you like me
And can you
to move my camera around or?
no, that is okay.
Okay.
Can you please confirm that the only electronic devices that you're using today are the ones that you're using to talk to me?
Yes, that's the only thing I've got on my desk here. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So before we begin the interview, are there any questions you have for me about the setup, or are you happy to go?
No, I think I'm happy.
Okay, great. So we'll start with a geometry question. If you
Okay.
can turn to the Jamboard that we've got shared, I'm just going to bring up now the question. So hopefully that will appear. Perfect. So as you can see, we've got 2 circles inside a square. And what we want to do is calculate the ratio of the gray area inside the circles with the total area of the square, please.
Okay. So I think the first thing I'm going to do, because I obviously need to start doing some equations, is I'm going to call the side of the square A, which are obviously going to be the same because it's a square. And then it says that there's a relationship between the circles. So I'm going to call the small, I'm going to say that the small circle has a radius of R, which is going to be the same on the other side. And then it says that the larger circle has a radius of 2R. So I'm going to define it based on the small circle to be 2R and 2R. And then it asks me to deal with areas. So I know that for a square, the area for the square is going to be, is it okay if I continue to kind of speak my working as I go? Is that, or would you rather?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the area of the square would be A times A, which is going to be A squared. And then the area of the circles is going to be the area of the small circle, which is going to be just pi r squared. And then the area of the larger one, which I guess is pi, and then the 2r squared. So that's going to be a 4r squared. So that's 5 pi r squared. So if I was to then do a fraction of the area of the square occupied by the circles, then the fraction, I guess, would be the 5 pi r squared divided by the a squared. So is that what you're looking for?
So sorry, can you just move what you've written over a bit, because I can't quite see to the full weight.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah, I can just move that over briefly so you can see.
So we're looking for a relationship here between A and R that you've not quite captured yet. So you've written down the ratio of the total of the circles and the square of side A, but we can find this in a more interesting form, shall we say, if you can relate R and A better than keeping them as 2 different parameters.
Oh, okay. So you'd like me to make a okay. So a relationship between R and A to kind of simplify this down a little bit.
So try and substitute out A for something containing R's, or R for something containing A's.
If you get to a point like this where you believe that you've fully answered the question, it is normal for the interviewers to ask you for some extra information, perhaps an extra comparison between variables in the question, or simply an extension to the question that's being asked. So don't be concerned if you don't get an answer that is, you are correct, everything has been done. Extending in the question is extremely normal. So don't worry.
So it's completely normal in the interviews for there to be natural stopping points and extension points throughout a question. And so if you think you've reached one yourself and don't stare at the paper wondering what to do next, you can always ask and vocalize if you're a bit confused with what's going on or if you've answered everything that is needed. And generally the interviewer will actually help to pull you through onto the different stages and keep the interview moving along. So if you feel at all stuck, just ask if you're stuck. No one finishes the questions before they move on, certainly not in one of my interviews.
Okay, so we're going to need something that relates R and A. The only thing that kind of makes sense to me looking at this diagram might be the diagonal of the square, because obviously we can relate that to A. We have a simple triangle, so that the length of the green diagonal would be so we'd have A squared plus A squared equals L squared if we were to call the length of this L. So it would be root 2A. Whoop. So root 2A. So the length of this would be root 2A. And then I would need to get that in terms of the radius of the circles. So let's have a think about how I might do that. So I guess what I could do is I can get this distance here by again dropping another triangle, and this would be green is not a particularly good color, so let me change that color. This radius here would be 2r, and then because there's a symmetry here, we can have 2r here as well. So we have another triangle where I can work out the length of this kind of section of the diagonal. So that would be a 2r and a 2r. So 2r squared plus 2r squared, which would be 8r squared for the diagonal, and then I would have to take the square root of that. So if I call this L, I should probably call it something else, X. So X can be 4r squared plus 4r squared, 8r squared. X is going to be this. X squared is this. So X is square root of 8r, which is 2 root 2r. And I guess that this distance will be double that distance. So that longer diagonal would be 4 root 2r.
Careful. What are you saying is double?
Oh, it's not quite double because we have a little bit extra here, right? Yes. That's a brief mistake that I made. If you make a mistake in the question, it's not completely fatal. It's very, very normal to make mistakes, particularly under pressure. What's more important is how you respond to those mistakes. Take on board the advice and criticism that you're being given by the interviewer and look to correct the mistake.
It's expected in these interviews that the students will make mistakes. It's not because we're asking any trick questions. It's simply that everyone is a bit stressed, and it's perfectly normal for there to be some mistakes in these questions. And so don't worry about that at all. It's all part of the process. We're more interested in how you're addressing the questions, and we will guide you through when mistakes happen, help you catch them, and get you on to the next part of the question.
So actually, in this actual case, the length of this orange line is going to be the 2 root 2r, but then we're going to have to add on another 2r. So it's going to be 2 into 1 plus root 2r is going to be that length here.
Okay.
And then I guess I'm going to have to repeat a similar process for the bottom triangle. So again, I can drop the radii. So it's R and R. Again, I'm going to have another triangle where I have R.
That's all looking really good, Sam. I can see you've got the idea behind this well. You're definitely going to get that bit through to completion. I'm going to do exactly as I promised I would and tear you from one question to the next. so that we can exercise a bit more of the syllabus. So we're going to do a probability question now. If you could clear that over and give us a fresh screen. Perfect.
Okay.
So it's totally normal for interviewers to drag you off from one question to another. Don't worry about that if it happens. All right, Sam. So I want you to write down Bayes' formula for me. Do you remember that?
I believe so. So that's the probability of A given B is equal to the probability of B given A multiplied by the probability of A all over the probability of B.
You sounded a bit uncertain about that. You sure you've written that down right, or should we derive it? Do you know how to derive Bayes? Should we give it a go?
Yeah, we can give that a go.
So let's start with like the most basic probability axiom. So do you know what the formula is for the probability of A times the probability of B?
So the probability of A and B is equal to the probability of A times by the probability of B given A.
That's right. So do you know how we can derive Bayes from that first axiom?
Well, we've got this part in here, I guess. So it probably pays to rearrange this slightly to be probability of A and B over the probability of A equals the probability of B given A.
Okay.
And then that is the same as this part here.
So yeah, we're on our way. If we look back at the middle, the probability of A and B equals the conditional part. What happens if we?
Oh, we're going to need the other way round as well to fill into to this equation. So maybe I can say the probability of B and A, which is exactly the same as A and B. So the probability of A and B, I guess I could also say is the probability of B times by the probability of A given B.
Yeah. And then you can equate those, your sort of second line down and your fourth line down, can't you?
Yeah. So if I then put these together, this one with this
one. And unfortunately, Darren, you're not going to find out the really cool question that I've got for you next, because I'm afraid we've run out of time.
I was enjoying my time with Reverend Thomas. Anyway. Yeah.
No, don't worry. So that's all we got time for, except if there is a question you have about the course or the college or anything like that, we always leave a minute at the end. It's not examined, so don't worry if you don't have a question. But now is the time if you do.
I guess I can't ask how I did. When will I hear back about how I did in these interviews?
So we interview all the way through this week and deliberate towards the end, and you'll hear after Christmas as to what happens next.
Okay.
And but certainly before then, you've got your next interview, which I believe is in an hour according to my schedule. So best of luck with that, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a good Christmas. Thank you.
That wasn't too scary, was it, Sam?
You were a lot less scary than the ones that I had back in the day. So well done, I guess, on that front.
And I forgot to mention, actually, I'm not exactly very well dressed for you today, but this is also sort of entirely realistic that you could be interviewed by somebody in a hoodie and a t-shirt. I mean,
somebody who looks like they've just played poker for 15 hours before coming to the interview.
There'll be a whole range. There'll be people very smartly dressed in very pretty surroundings, and there'll be people who are quite relaxed about it. And I think I experience it in the other direction as well, and that's fine. No one has to come smartly dressed to their interview. The most important thing is that they're comfortable in that interview. So we're certainly not grading people on whether they've got a tie on or not.
To be fair, you look like the tech entrepreneur that you are, so that's good. So you talked briefly there about a potential second interview. So after you've done the subject specific interview, you may be asked to do a personal statement interview. So can you tell us briefly about what that is and how that might proceed?
So the personal statement interview is to give us another measure of the students' abilities that they'll bring to the college beyond just their academic ones. So we have a very large number of students. We have a very small number of places. And so we will interview students for which there's many with very good academic abilities and they're academically strong enough to be here. And we're looking for other aspects that they'll bring to college too. And so sporting prowess, being a chess champion, there's all sorts of things that
musical instruments, I guess, things like this.
Yeah, everything and anything that they've done, running a charity. There's all sorts of amazing things that people do come and we discuss it with them. One of my top tips is don't lie on your personal statement.
So just to row back a second before you get more deeply into it, this will be like more a kind of friendly, for want of a better word, chat with a couple of academics from the college. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just kind of explaining who you are and your interests and what you get involved with.
It's literally, hey Sam, it says here that you've done an internship at CERT, and that sounds really cool. Tell me all about that. Yeah. And also it says that you do a lot of rowing. Tell me all about that, or play a lot of rugby, or whatever it might be. And so certainly, sometimes we catch people who've lied on their personal statement because they can't talk about the thing. And that obviously does not go down brilliantly. So biggest piece of advice I can possibly give is don't lie on a personal statement.
These things on the personal statement help to show that you're a more well-rounded individual, that you have interests, passions around the topic, around outside of your academic pursuit. So you'll take advantage of the opportunities, the facilities that we have at Cambridge, the connections that we have, and also, I guess, to show that you can self-motivate yourself and that you can organize your time outside of lectures and outside of academic pursuits.
Yeah, that's very important. So Cambridge is a very, very intensive undergraduate degree. So the terms are shorter than all of the universities. Something like natural sciences, you're studying multiple sciences in your first year and then specializing in whatever it might be that you end up, physics or chemistry, whatever. By the time you get to that stage, you've learned just as much as other universities where it was, say, all physics in the first year, but you only did a quarter physics in your first year. So there's an awful lot crammed in to some of these courses. And it's called reading for a degree for a reason. And so we want to confirm that the people we're taking are themselves highly motivated to learn and highly interested in it. Obviously, there are people who are able to do very well in their studies before getting to university, and a big part of it is that someone else is pushing them and driving them who might not be there at university later. Parents or teachers really have pushed them along, and we don't have the time to push every student along personally like their parents do. And so we are looking for people who have lots of drive to do lots of things, and that we will feel confident that they will be able to excel when they're here and be relatively autonomous.
Makes sense. So a friendlier chat, no specific knowledge needed, just explain yourself, explain your interests, your passions, the things that you get involved with around the subject, and just be honest about yourself.
Yeah. I think in other universities, they just read the personal statement and take it at face value. We're probably us in Oxford are probably the only people who actually will spend 25 minutes discussing your personal statement with you. And so, make sure you can accurately discuss every aspect. So the other thing that came up that we could quickly note was selection of college. So for those people who are watching these videos with quite a bit of time before their Cambridge interview, a year and a bit, as opposed to just a bit, we might want to quickly discuss that. So,
sure.
Because I remember not having a clue how to go about choosing a college, and sort of reading through a few prospectuses and stuff. And I'd say it's very, very useful if you can to physically come to Cambridge. It's tiny. You can walk around the whole thing in a few hours, see some colleges. There's big ticket aspects of this. Like, do you want to go for a college like Queen's there in the background, this beautiful old college with all of this heritage, hundreds and hundreds of years old. Or do you want to go to a more modern college where they might not mind you walking on the grass and you don't have to wear a gown and all this sort of stuff? Are you very, very sporty and want to be near the boathouses or near the rugby ground or near the university sports centre? Do you want to maximize your sleeping and minimize your commuting? And do you want to be very close to your department, which was my choice?
Do you mind being where lots of tourists are potentially wandering around and looking in your windows and just being in your general vicinity?
Yeah, and so there's this aspect of what do you want to get out of the college as much as anything else. I do not recommend randomly choosing a college or putting down an open application where you are randomly allocated to the college. I mean, even if you just spend some time researching it online, if you can't visit Cambridge, it's definitely worth putting some effort into figuring out what it is you want to do. It's not really the case that colleges sort of truly choose to specialize in any subjects. But there's been some of these aspects of kind of natural leanings in some directions because of particular fellows that have been there a very long time and then attracted people to join the college because they're, a world-renowned physicist or a world-renowned computer scientist.
And I think this is just worth kind of flagging up, just pulling back a very tiny amount and very quickly. Some people might not even realize what we're talking about in terms of colleges, because a lot of universities that people apply to, you apply to Manchester or Bristol or wherever it is, and you're put into halls and away you go. In Cambridge, you actually apply to one of the, I want to say
30 odd. I should know.
Yeah, should know, but 20 to 30 colleges. And the college will be where you live, where you do your washing up, where you wash your clothes. But you will actually learn centrally with other people doing your subject from other colleges. So it's kind of choosing where you live, choosing the community that you're going to be doing, that you're going to be interacting with, rather than worrying too much about subject specific stuff. But as Ramsey just said, certain colleges do tend to have a little bit more of a flavour, perhaps towards certain subjects.
Yeah, it's as much as sort of developed a reputation and it's this self-fulfilling prophecy then. And so, Trinity is seen as being very strong for maths. Churchill was set up by Sir Winston Churchill because he visited MIT and really liked the idea of a very science and technology focused college to be set up in Cambridge. And Churchill, it's written into Churchill statutes that they must be 80% science, maths, and engineering. And so it is a heavily sciencey college.
If you like really ugly breeze block buildings, then, get along to Churchill.
The colleges all have their own distinct architecture. Yes, there are different tastes. But Churchill...
They're different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, and Churchill's right by the West Cambridge site, and so people who want a short commute to their lectures and stuff choose a close by college. Some people want to be right in the centre of town, right in the centre of the city centre, etc.
Churchill is fantastic, a fantastic college, by the way, and lovely.
A hell of a lot.
I'm just winding Ramsey up because
and Queen's is amazing, which is where I'm at the moment. For loads, it's beautiful mathematical bridge and this beautiful great gate that you're seeing there as well. And you were at Selwyn, I believe.
Selwyn,
So right by the university library. So I'm sure that's where you were all the time.
College bar, I think, more than that. But yes.
But 31 colleges, I Googled it. I knew it was, I wanted to say 32. I knew it was over 30. So yes, well worth a little bit of research. And as I said, it was my college open day where I went to a few and met the people who would be interviewing me at Churchill. And that was a big factor then. That I felt so relaxed about going to those interviews because I'd already met the people. That can be good too.
But as we kind of alluded to earlier, if you don't get your first choice, you do end up going into the pool and going somewhere else. Cambridge is not that sprawling a place. Everything is pretty central on the whole, and you can get to anywhere you need to go on a bike in 15 minutes pretty much.
Yeah, Girton is the most northern college, Hamilton's the most southern, and you could cycle between the two of those in 25 minutes, probably. Yeah.
Exactly right. Excellent. So I hope this has shown you what to expect from an interview at Oxbridge, a typical interview. Ramsey, thank you very much for your time and expert insights.
Cool. No, thank you, Sam. Hopefully this will be a really useful video for people to watch this year and in many years to come.
And we both wish you the very best in your upcoming interviews. I want to know what you think, because you're the scholars of enlightenment that I do this for. So please take a moment, if you wish, to let me know down in the comment section. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, setting up notifications, and sharing this video more widely. I can't tell you how much these simple actions help me out and how much I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being scientific. Thanks for being bad.